Welcome back to Masters of Modern. I'm your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host, Ben Bateman.
What's up, everybody? How you doing? We're back. We're excited to talk about Magic. There's a lot of crazy things happening this week. Magic is ablaze. It's on fire.
Yeah, I rolled an 8 with my eye dice that I was doing in the intro. So there's a lot going on in Magic. One very specific thing. Ban and restriction announcements are next week. There's companions on everyone's mind. If you can't tell by the title of the episode, today we're going to be talking about how Wizards should be printing more companions. And before you jump down our throat, we'll get into that very shortly. First, big thank you to our patrons, specifically the Nobles of House Modern.
Pinky out.
Pinky out.
Yes, the Nobles of the House Modern. We got Cam, we got Andrew, we got Brandon. It's a tier on the Patreon where we jump on like a little 15-minute kind of Google chat type of hangout. We do it through Discord. We get to talk to you guys, kind of find out a little bit more about you, and then you contribute kind of ideas to the episode. So tonight we got to hang with Cam for about 15 minutes before the show. But yeah, thank you to you guys. It's the upper couple tiers. Go to patreon.com/the MMcast and check out all the cool new stuff we introduced. So thank you to all those folks.
Yeah, so on the subject of the episode, the fact that I now have an AT-AT in the background, there's a lot of work in there. We're going to do a whole episode on the construction of an AT-AT, both fictionally in the Star Wars universe and how I built it using the power of Lego technology.
I don't know if I'm qualified to speak on the mechanics.
And you don't know
particular device.
Legos? You can't talk about Legos? That's not I feel like you were a Lego master as a kid.
I loved Legos as a kid. Do you know, as a kid, Alec, we'd spend weeks building like palaces. I'm talking like, 4 feet high, 7 layers, like chains, stuff hanging down. And then we would take our Nerf guns, and from about 20 feet away, me and my stepbrother would take turns shooting at it and trying to demolish the Lego city. There was like a whole game. There was like a heart of the city, a king. We'd try to take him out. It was so much fun.
You just slaughter them like giants.
Yeah, you could use like all different Nerf guns, but I would always use like the giant rocket because like a battering ram, try to knock down the gate. It was great. Anyway, that's my story.
Speaking of slaughtering the innocents using the power level of giant things, that's a terrible segue. Companions. So since they've been released into the wild, and as of this week are starting to actually get into players' hands physically, they've kind of taken Magic by storm. They've dominated Eternal formats like Legacy and Vintage, and have now, I think, of the like top 20 decks on MTG Goldfish, are most of Modern are playing one companion in their sideboard, and then dominating Standard, dominating Pioneer, really, really kind of have turned Magic on its head. And we want to have a discussion on what does this mean? Are they fun? What does that look like? And what the deal is. I mean, companions have become ubiquitous across Magic, but they're doing something that previously shows up cards haven't done before, right? They're not miserable to play against, I guess, is the main point. They're not like Oko, where basically you have these long drawn out games where this thing would make every card you play invalid. You don't have stuff like Mental Misstep, where you like are basically playing a weird mini game at the beginning of every game of who drew the most mental missteps to be able to play their one drop. And kind of like other classically big bad mechanics, Eldrazi, ramping stuff to big threats that are just like so obnoxiously powerful you can't defeat it. This is just like weird value engines, right? They're weird extra. You got to draw an extra card every game that your opponent doesn't, unless they're also playing a companion, which forces you both to play it. And it's been really interesting to see what they've done. We're still pretty early in the format. I mean, obviously in Legacy and Vintage, there's a different conversation. And Vintage is fascinating because they can't ban cards normally. There's only like Scheherazade and anti cards, and physical activity cards are the only things banned there. So that'll see what they do, because restricting a companion doesn't do anything in Vintage. But yeah, that's kind of the subject matter of the day, and our thoughts on what are the different options that Wizards can do.
Yeah, and so, I mean, just jumping in first for anybody on audio that's listening that maybe is, a little behind what's going on. So the companion mechanic is a mechanic that is being introduced in Ikoria Lair of Behemoths. It's the new set. It's coming out this week in physical, but paper Magic, I should say. The set Ikoria has been available online for a couple weeks, but just we're only getting it now physically in paper Magic this week. And the companion mechanic is basically one that states this is a legendary creature. It's just a normal creature with a regular casting cost, but it says companion. If you build your deck this particular way, you can have this card be your companion, which means that's one of your sideboard cards in formats that use sideboards, and you can cast it once during the game from your sideboard. So it's like starting the game with an extra card, which is kind of where the conversation starts and stops, of what do we do about this because it's a game mechanic that's not familiar, right? It's a little different than what we've played with in the past. It's kind of similar to having a commander in a game of Commander, but it's consistent and it's 1v1. So that's a bit of the conversation is there are different options people have suggested. There's a lot of kind of crazy uproar online about how to handle this. And yeah, I think we're going to kind of step through a little bit of how we should be handling it, because there is a banned and restricted announcement that's going to be coming next Monday, the 18th of May. It's said to only affect some of the older formats. It's not going to affect standard or modern.
Or Pioneer. Yeah. So the announcement on Monday, which this episode should be coming on Friday, so it's like in 2 days from release, we'll be announcing bannings from Vintage and Legacy and Brawl are the three formats that they announced. Wizards announced the formats a week ahead of time and then gives you a week to kind of know that these are the formats you need to be a little bit wary of and see what's going on and maybe make predictions of what's going to be banned. If I had to bet real dollars, $2 bill to someone on the internet, I think me and Nick Prince are probably on the same side on this, so that won't work. But like Luros in Legacy and Vintage, and then and maybe more in Vintage. Vintage is going to be the weird one, and then Brawl. There's a white 2-drop for my Ikoria that I'm forgetting the name of, but basically it makes it so you can't play your commander in Brawl, so they'll probably ban that in Brawl. But basically, for Magic at large, there's only really 3 options with companions, right? Because the mechanic itself is so powerful and inherently does the same thing regardless. Like, even if you drop power level, if we banned the top 3, the next 4 good ones are still doing the thing that those 3 do. And so the first option is ban them all, which has a huge ramifications, or even by ban them all, ban most of them, is kind of a similar space. You're adding 7 cards to the ban list. You have the second option, which is ban some, which if they do continue to be as popular, you're lowering the diversity of choices between different companions you see play. So in some ways, lowering the diversity of the format by only eliminating the most played ones, which are in some ways the most played just due to versatility. Or 3, which is kind of one of the things that this episode is named after, which as an option, which is print more, right? Like the option right now is if Magic is about these cards, and if that's kind of the way that Eternal formats moving forward will have access to, and some decks will have access to them no matter what, unless they ban all of them, the best way to fight against them in some ways is an arms race of printing more of them, adding this is a part of Magic now. Wizards have decided this is something they want to do. It's fun, and that'll be kind of the next conversation we have. But one of the options is to increase diversity in the way that making sure that every game you play against isn't just against Luros or isn't just against Yorion, adding more companions and going through there's a Twitter thread that we'll link to that has all of the different things that fans have come up with of like different ways and different restrictions you can have, but different cards that can come out. So that's kind of the third option, right? I guess there's also do nothing, which is probably what they're going to do in the short term, but eventually one of these things is going to come to a head. But I think, and this is the first question we have, is, are companions fun? Because that's kind of the most important thing. This is a game. If they're adding something extremely beneficial to the game or something that's fun to the game and is something that people enjoy, then different values get applied to, do you ban them, right? Brainstorm isn't every deck in Legacy, but it's also the backbone of Legacy, one of the most fun things you could do there. So there's more allowances towards that than say something like Oko, which was miserable to play against and was in every deck, so you're just miserable to play Magic because it's a game and you want to have fun.
I think that if the first question is, are they fun? I think the answer to that question has got to be, number one, we don't know long-term if they're fun. Every single time something new gets introduced that's really powerful and overwhelming, and there's an uproar like there is right now, usually, I would say more than 50% of the time, things change, new things get printed, metagame changes happen, and that thing that everybody was clamoring for banning or a change stops being as much of the boogeyman as it seemed like. That's usually pretty common, right? Like, so that's number one. We don't know. The sample size is not large enough yet that we can really decide if these are fun.
4 weeks of online tournaments, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, these is not even paper cards yet, right? Like, the Magic was intended and designed initially to be played as a paper game. This doesn't even exist in paper yet. We don't have the cards. I've never played one. Now, I can tell you, as somebody who has obviously played a lot of, this 1v1 format Highlander, like, and a lot of our friends in that circle who have been on the Pro Tour, we've had a lot of conversations with that group. And one of the constants within that group, one of the reasons those people like that 100-card format so much is you don't have a commander, right? This singleton format, they all like because you don't consistently know you're going to hit this card on this turn if you want to each turn of the game. Not to say that's a bad thing. That's one of the major appeals of that particular singleton format. And I think any singleton format that's not doing it. So right off the bat, if you ask me, is it fun or not? I don't like the idea of my opponent and myself having access to the same card on a certain turn of the game every game, because I like, even when I have 4 of my favorite card in the deck, like I need to draw Hunted Horror, like I need to draw it to play it on turn 2. No matter the fact that I still have 4 of them, there will still be some best of 3 matchups where I don't draw a Hunted Horror in my opening hand all 3. It just doesn't happen. Doesn't matter that I have all 4, or I just don't draw them. And that's just the variance of not having a card guaranteed. And I think that's the way Magic has existed for a long time. If you're just going to change it, inherently change the structure of the game with this rule and go forward printing it, I don't know if that's fun. I'm not totally sure if it's fun to always have these in Magic at all times.
I mean, I think there's 2 sides of it, right? Like, one, I think it's very hard to argue that having a commander in Magic is unfun, seeing that the most played version of Magic
People love it. Totally.
is playing with commanders. Now, and there's, I think, a bias here too. I think, and you're a good example of that, where people have this weird visceral reaction that are competitive players to commanders because they dislike multiplayer play, right? Like, you hate multiplayer play. I mean, maybe you don't hate it, but you dislike it more than regular Magic to an extent.
I like 1v1 competitive play more. I've really warmed up to Commander. I would say that I enjoy Commander.
It's taken me 8 years of literally dragging you through the mud to get you to kind of enjoy Commander. But when we discuss it, your issue with it isn't people get to play with commanders, right? Your issue with it is what I do doesn't matter as much as I would like, because there's 3 other people that have an effect on what's going to happen to me in the game. But that has been so inherently attached to commanders that now that those are being seen, there's some some association between the two. But from a fun perspective, there's a reason people like Commander, right? There's a reason, and there's a reason people like Commander versus 100-card singleton multiplayer, because that's a format you can play. Like, there's Canadian Highlander multiplayer games that I've
course.
And the other side of that, and this is the flooding versus mana flooding side, right? Like, mana flooding and mana screw, which are inherently locked to each other, sucks. It is arguably the worst part of Magic. And
Agreed.
You could argue that it allows there to be some variance in the game that makes it so that you have always a chance that your better opponent will get mana screwed, though there's other reasons that they could still get unlucky through the luck of the draw, even with a companion. But the mechanics that are most popular, cycling, scry, are mechanics that also help get rid of that mana flood, mana screw problem. And companions do that, right? They allow me to play with 28 lands versus 26 and 24, 23 lands. And that means I'm going to flood out more often. That's normally the flaw of playing with 28 lands. But because I have my companion, I'm always going to at least have that card that for sure does something, right? It's different than drawing a card, because that card could just be another land in mana flood situations. I will always have Loros. I'm always going to have Yorion. I'm always going to have Lutri, and that makes it so that mana floods happen in less games, which means that there's less non-games. Like, I think a lot of Wizards design space for best of one and in general, and that's why the London Mulligan happened, right? That change happened because at a Pro Tour, LSV lost because he mulliganed to 4 in the final game.
Yeah, and we've seen it happen enough times. I would agree. I think to add to your point here, just backing up, because I know that when these were previewed, right, the initial thing, they even said it in the spoiler article on Wizards. They were like, this sounds familiar to a format that people play, right? They reference Commander. And I think the thing with Commander, to just sort of clarify the comparison, I think Commander players that like Commander totally enjoy hitting their Commander. I think actually that's one of the most fun parts of Commander, is you build your deck all around the idea that you're always going to have this thing. So the whole deck construction can consistently play out in such a way that you'll always hit it on turn 4, turn 5, whatever, right? That's a very fun component of Commander, whether it's like 1v1 Commander or it's group play. What I'm saying is, I think the players that find Commander to be fun and enjoy that aspect of it, by and large, are not the players who Companion is affecting as much, right? Like, those are players that enjoy a format that doesn't care about like a 4 of rule or curving out into a really like value engine 3-drop every game. I think it's a different group of players.
I think I don't agree with that. I think that at this point, 99% of Magic players play Commander, and I would say that 80% of Commander players, if not 60% at a low end, play some version of competitive 2-player Magic, be it Draft or Limited or Standard or Modern or Vintage. I think that's a very small percent. I think it's like 1% or people are playing Vintage. Vintage is awesome. It's just no one owns Black Lotuses.
I guess my point with what I was saying is I feel like the general concern, the conversation we're having here about should we or should we not print more of these, should we ban them, has way less to do with players that enjoy multiplayer games of Commander or that mechanic. It's way more to do with players that are on Moto grinding. They want to win. They want to gain an advantage. And this advantage, because it is such a strong one, is going to start to homogenize the way that we play Magic at the highest level. I think that's the concern, right? The concern is that we don't want Magic to feel like the same every time. We don't know if this is a good idea or not.
Yeah, so this, I mean, I have a little list of the ways these aren't fun, right? One of them is, I mean, the last fun one is it does create a cool deck building challenge, right? Like each new companion, like right now we have the 10, but if we have more, each one comes with inherent additional cool ways to build a deck, be it every card has to be colorless. Every card has to have flash or be an instant. Every card has to be a merfolk. You know, there's all the different requirements that you could have in a deck that could be really cool to build decks around. And that does offer challenges, though it does kind of silo things, which is the reverse side of that, right? The ways it could not, but it does, through deck building restrictions, cause homogenization. Right now, every Luros deck out there has to be 2 drops or less. And in Standard, that's a very limited card pool versus Modern, which is much wider. And like, it's almost a bell curve, right? Where like Standard, it's less decks can play Luros. Modern and Pioneer seem to be the most. And then Legacy eventually get to like Lions and Diamond is just so powerful that all the other options are bad.
Right. I mean, I think your point there is really, really key, which is like they've said in the past, they don't design and test for Modern, they design and test for Standard. And in Standard, they don't feel as problematic to me. I mean, the way that the Standard format would be played with these in it is fine, I guess. Like, you know, that would last for a season. And like you said, the deck building restriction is a lot more real, you know, or a year and a half, whatever you want to call it. But the point is that deck building restriction is so much more real and Standard that it's just like, this is what Standard's going to look like for a while. People are going to be playing with these cards. And if you can do something more powerful than this deck building restriction allows, then don't play with a companion. Like, I don't really care about that aspect of it. And so I actually think that the sort of fun meter we're talking about, Standard's not the concern for me, because they didn't design these being like, oh yeah, this and Mishra's Bauble is just something that every single deck that can support it is going to do.
But, and we'll talk about Mishra's Bauble later, but I'm going to bring my inner Michael Grothy into the conversation at that point.
Spoiler, Fannings.
In regards to Standard, I don't know if I agree with you just from the perspective that there are a lot of Standard players saying that this is a huge problem there. And I think part of that is it's like bias, right? There's a level of, and the other reasons, like every match has a similar 36, right? Like when you play with companions, every turn 3 to 6 is going to be about playing your companion. Now, some decks will be later. Yorion decks are often more control-y, so that could be a later thing that you save on to later in the game. But that's kind of one of the issues I think people are having. You look at Standard, every single deck that sees Standard play till next year has a companion in it, right? Like that's just the world we live in. If there are 10 different decks that see consistent play over a year and a half that are all competitive, that seems so much more diverse to me than Standard. There are standards. There are standards that like have that diversity, but they are rare and they are far and few between. And especially once rotation happens and like there just isn't enough cards to make some of these companions work and they fall by the wayside. I like when we did the Twitch Rivals thing, I spent 18 hours talking about 3 decks.
No, I know. I mean, that's a really interesting point. You know, you and I think over the course of a couple months, both did these large Standard Twitch Rivals tournaments. And I had the similar experience where it was like, can't wait to talk about this ramp deck that plays Agent of Treachery and who draws it wins the game again. Like this is just the same deck over and over again. And it felt like, you know, you're watching basically 4 decks. And that's, look, if the companions eradicate that gameplay because they're all strong enough that you have
reasons to be pigeonholed down to 10 different strategies. And some of them are versatile enough that they offer multiples, right?
Yeah, I think that's cool. I think that's totally cool. I get that point of view, like where you are the homogenous nature of it in a format like Standards, I think a little more okay. And also, I mean, to compare it like really quickly to our format, you know, to Modern, like Yeah, like there were years in Modern where if a deck wasn't playing Snapcaster Mage, it wasn't like it wasn't competitive. You know, I should go beyond that, but like the 5 most played cards, if it wasn't playing like Snap, Goyf, Bob, right? Like, you know,
Not
there
even
was 5 cards that if you weren't playing this card, you were probably not doing it right.
yeah,
And
Thoughtseize,
you
Lightning
know,
Bolt, Path, Noble Hierarch.
yeah, like that's not that different. It's just just the big difference there is that the guarantee of the turn you're going to hit it is where we'll get to it in a second, but like that's an inherent rule change. That
Right.
doesn't feel like you're playing the same game anymore. And we'll get to that in a minute.
And that's kind of an interesting question, right? Is Modern worse? And we'll get into it a little bit later, but something to remember: is Modern worse in a world where the most played cards aren't Lightning Bolt, but they're Luros? They aren't Lightning Bolt, but they're Yorion, right? Like, they're these threats or grindy engine cards that are mid-tier creatures that die to every removal spell under the sun. Or is it better when everything's a hyper efficient 1-drops and 2-drops? And that'll be that's the greater question for Modern. But kind of going into that, I do want to have a conversation about how do these compare to previous broken moments in Modern, right? This is, at least right now in the 3-week period, being compared to Oko and Eldrazi and those moments when like a format was printed in the standard that broke every format below it. And, you know, I talked about the Oko the miserable gameplay section, right? The Oko, the misstep, the Hogak, where like you are losing on turn 3, you're not really doing anything, you can't interact your opponent, there's nothing that happens, or it's just like creates a super uninteractive game state. Other things on that layer, just like format warping decks that just make it 1 or 2 decks in the format, right? That's another pretty miserable moment that's what Eldrazi was. That's a great example of what Eldrazi is a great example, right? Where this deck came out, it was so good that literally if you were not playing Eldrazi or like the other flavor of Eldrazi
variant,
you were not playing Magic in Modern. That was something that you should just not be playing anymore. And that would be problematic. And I don't think that's what's happening here. Yes, you need to be playing a companion, but not every companion deck is one of 2 decks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with the companion question, how it compares to other broken formats is, okay, you look at the 3 most played companions right now, and I think like in order, I want to say it's like Luris, maybe like Yorion, and then Obosh. Feels like they're the 3 that everyone's playing.
The third one is harder. Obosh is currently the one that is in a deck that's doing well, but it's like Luros is in like 7 different to 8 different tier 1 decks. Yorion's in 3 to 4. Obosh is in the 1, maybe 2, and then the other ones are all in a 1 deck, and the power level of those cards are debatable.
Those top 3 that I mentioned,
but that could change.
None of those 3 are cards that if you play it, then that turn or the next turn, you combo out, go infinite, and win the game, right? Like none of those are that card. They're all cards that basically generate. Say what?
Sorry, I believe there's. Yeah, you're correct.
Of those 3, yeah.
So
of those 3,
companions that do that, but those are not those 3.
Yeah, they're all value engines. Every one of those cards is a clear, just like, I'm gonna play this, and I'm gonna like with Obosh or with Luris, it's like, okay, I'm either gonna just like in burn be able to like have access to all of these creatures, so I can just like suicide them and then replay them and play my baubles to get more cards, right? In Urion's case, it's like this is a control finisher that's also gonna blink all my planeswalkers and just get me tons of value off of this like Omen of the Sea. And then like Obosh, it's just like you just hyper Blood Red Elf, right? Like that's basically, it's just like getting that much more value. So my issue with that is those types of strategies where you're like blinking things and you're getting persist creatures and you're doing like that sort of inevitability feeling is not fun for me to play against. I like to try to eke my way into a win. I like to try to deal 20 damage exactly. That's how I like to play Magic. I already struggle when I play against cards like Kitchen Finks. I already struggle when I play against cards that like just have a lot of value and I have to really grind my way into a win.
But now if you're telling me Death Shadow's seeing play, like Death Shadow is one of the top played decks in the format right now. Like that, I don't think that strategy has disappeared. You have to play Luros, right? Like you have to play a companion. That's the issue. But you're not. There's a tempo deck in the format. There's a control deck in the format. There's a grindy combo deck in the format. There's Burn. Burn is seeing a lot of play. But all of those strategies have.
They're represented. I get it.
I guess is my point. Is yes, you're
right now. If the top strategies on Goldfish right now in Modern are the decks 1, 2, and 3 are utilizing those planeswalkers, or sorry, those companions. it's not the same thing as some of the broken formats we've been talking about, like Hogak and Eldrazi. Like that's a different flavor. That's just like that's getting steamrolled in a way that these are not representing.
I think,
but I don't know if I like that more. it's just that it's a little more fair. I guess it's designed to be a little more fair.
Well, but like when we talk about bannings, right? When Wizards stated their main 3 reasons of bannings is diversity, which is really the conversation of the day, because these other ones aren't what's happening. Winning before turn 3, right?
Yep.
And like breaking the rules of tournament Magic, like eggs. Top was not legalized because it just doesn't work. And as far as those later 2, these aren't an issue, right? They're not winning. None of them are winning on turn 3. The combo wins. I think Lutri probably has a combo that exists. Not Lutri, the red white one. It's there. Marshall put it on the screen. Maybe
is that that's the Training Grounds one?
It's the Training Grounds one probably has something that it can maybe do. And then the other one is the big one. Giruda is the one that like can win the turn it comes into play, right?
That's the clone even numbered one.
Yeah, it's just it costs 6 mana.
Yeah.
and is playing a deck just that's all clones, which is hard medium in modern, but not hard. Like it's good in standard. Like inherently, it's closer to me to like a combo of 2 different moments that have been bannable, right? It's the Delve era, which is one to kind of take into consideration, right? And it's the Bloodbraid Elf early days, Splinter Twin, Birthing Pod, Stoneforge Mystic, Bitter Blossom kind of value engine bannings that happened and then kind of were undone up to this point, other than Birthing Pod.
That's where you compare companions to those feelings, because the general like low CMC value sort of.
Well, with Delve, it's a mechanic was printed. Multiple cards from that mechanic were immediately seeing play in multiple decks in Modern in a hyper aggressive way. In a way that people were very, 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 very much like, oh, this is a problem. But if you look at the top 8s towards the end of that season, it's some of the most diverse top 8 GPs that Magic has ever had in Modern, right? Like there was 8 different decks. Many of them were playing Treasure Cruise. The other half were playing Dig Through Time, and the other one was playing Birthing Pod. They banned those 3 cards the week later, but that had 8 different decks. There was like 4 different Treasure Cruise decks, from Delver to Jeskai Ascendancy to Scape Shift. There's just different things being played, using those cards and seeing play. And so on that end, that works for me. I don't think they're comparable in power level to Delve cards. Like I think Treasure Cruise is a better card than most any companion. I would say I'm comfortable that it is better than Luros.
I think Luros is close, but yeah, I think Treasure Cruise is still better. Because Cruise is definitely still better. Because
you have 1 Luros, right? If I have a Bolt, you've lost your if I cast Luros and you Lightning Bolt Luros, I've just casted Divination. That's
and I know, and like I hear you, but like if I counter your Cruise, then I've countered your Cruise. Like you're discrediting the fact.
I have 3 Cruises in my deck, or more if I'm playing Dig Through Time. I have 1 Luros ever. Because I can't play with more in my deck, and once it's out of my sideboard, it's gone.
You can only play with 1 copy, and because it costs 3, right? Sure, okay, yeah. So
Urion, you can play with 4. Urion's a different conversation, but with Luros, the one that we're talking about, and the conversation isn't that it's not powerful. I'm just saying I don't think it's better than Treasure Cruise, one of the most broken cards ever printed.
Yeah, I agree. I think Cruise is better. I think I'm just trying to. You are talking about it as though it's fun and comparing it to other things, but I haven't heard you yet say being able to hit something that is very, very pushed in at power level consistently on the 3rd turn of the game, every game as an extra card is insanely powerful. That's like a crazy good all-time level thing that we're talking about here. Do you agree?
I agree in the perspective that obviously it is because it's seeing play in the level it is in every format, but I don't know if that's bad.
I mean, powerful cards get printed, right? That's what happens. Like Magic sets come out and the cards are good.
Like and there's a difference between a powerful card seeing play that is unfun. Like and the difference in unfun between Oko and Luros is worlds apart.
Actually, let's take a quick second to compare those, because we are talking about different moments, and that's the most recent other 3-drop, right? That was very good.
Mm-hmm.
So they're both value-oriented 3-drops. That's what makes Luros good, is that you play it, you resolve it. In theory, maybe you have a bobble, you're getting an extra card, right? Oko, you're getting this advantage with like a large loyalty. Why, in your opinion, do you feel like Oko is so much less fun?
Oko comes into play turn 3. They both come into play in turn 3, fine. Oko doesn't guaranteed come into turn play. Luros does. Luros is a kitchen Finks-esque creature that draws me a card every turn. Oko is a removal spell that kills every single threat that my opponent plays, makes me so much life that they can never kill me, and comes into play at a moment where it's almost impossible to deal with based on any removal spell seeing play in the format other than apples to apples cards. Right? Like that's the difference. Is the board state that Oko creates is miserable. Luros draws me cards. Those cards could be miserable. Like I could be bringing back a removal spell every turn, I guess, is the best, which is the red enchantment that, what's it called?
Oh, yeah. Seal of Fire.
Seal of Fire, which is shock every turn, which fine.
Fine, yeah.
If I played a card that just like had tap do 2 damage, I wouldn't play it. And that's the difference, right? I think that was succinct actually. A 3/2 attacking lifelinker that draws me a card every turn is not that much. That costs 3 minutes. It's like Bob, but better. And then, which I think Bob is a fine card forever. And then on the other hand, you have like a single-handed card that makes every matchup miserable.
No, I mean, it makes sense what you described. I mean, I think the other way you could describe it is what you said earlier, which is like Bolt kills Luris, right? So does Push, so does Path. None of those things can kill an Oko that comes down in pluses, which is why Oko's banned.
Yeah, the only like 3 cards that see play in Modern regularly are Dreadbore, Assassin's Trophy, and Abrupt Decay.
Oh, Decay, right. And
like
Decay and Trophy work, but Dreadbore doesn't even necessarily, because you still get to plus it. You still get the value out in the first place.
Well, so he pluses it no matter what. But the nice thing about, well, if he removes a creature, it sucks. But yes, it's like, and it's not like Lightning Bolt killing Luros. You're up 2 mana. Like they drew a card, you're up a mana, I guess. Right. I don't know. That would be the difference between those. And what I was saying before with the Delve comparison, I do think it's the middle point. It's Delve in its ubiquitous of power level. Like you now have to play with Delve spell. You now have to play with companion spells. You had to play with Delve spells, or you had to be better than them. Uro decks do that now. Or it's the Bloodbraid Elf plus Birthing Pod plus where you just start playing cards that make your deck consistently have so much value that it's a benefit. But I don't know about you, but I have loved almost all of those cards. Even Splinter Twin, like all of those cards are things that are like what I want Magic to be like. And these companions, for the most part, even up to Splinter Twin with Gyarados, I'm never going to say that card's name. I will give every person who hates Commanders this. I hate all of their names. They're impossible to say. And I'm never going to pronounce them correctly.
I think one of the things that you're kind of alluding to, and I think this is actually one of the things that a lot of players have not said out loud, but I think is very important for us as, podcast hosts to acknowledge. It's exciting when Wizards prints things that are good. Like it's good when they push the power level and they print things that are exciting because we want to play them. We talk about them. You don't want things to be watered down for the sake of safety. I'd rather have to ban things than have boring cards. We've seen boring cards. We've seen boring formats, and it sucks. Mm-hmm. It makes Magic feel like a really, really, really loose game. So I'm happy to have these printed. I think we just get to the next part of the conversation, which is like, I don't know if having 100 of these things running around is going to make Magic better or worse, and I want to kind of get there.
So the one thing I did want to get to is kind of, obviously it's comparable to Delve, but then also the value engines. And I do think, and we're going to get through this, if I'm imagining what's going to happen versus what I think could happen, I think that Luros is very comparable to Birthing Pod. I think if I were to pick a card in Magic history that Luros was most comparable to, it's Birthing Pod and power level. You play it on turn 3. It then, from that point on, creates a card advantage engine that is very difficult to deal with. Luros is a little bit more immediate than Birthing Pod is. Birthing Pod arguably is a turn 4 that you lose life. But from that point on, basically by having it in play, you start generating so much value turn and turn out that you eventually just steamroll over your opponent and win. And I think that is what Luros is most comparable to me. Now, other ones are different. I think the way they're interacting with modern companions is most similar to Delve as far as mechanics. It's just like widespread power level at a base level of a mechanic. Now, Delve was because it just makes stuff cheaper and it's impossible to cost.
Right.
Where, because I think of Delve, 3 have been banned and 10 have seen competitive modern play.
10? Really?
So there's the red removal spell, there's the 2 creatures, there's the pump spell, there's the 3 that got banned. So that's 7. There's the
8,
blue.
or
Sorry, that's 8. There's the blue bounce spell that has seen play.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay, so 9. 8 to 10.
Actually, back in the day, way back in the day, Tombstalker.
Tombstalker and the counterspell and the green creature.
And Mandrills, yeah. So at least 10.
At least 10. Okay, cool. So yeah, so comparable in like amount of that mechanic to see play, and also explosively quick, right? Like as soon as Delve was printed, Treasure Cruise was like in every deck in the format. It to me it feels comparable to that as far as like ubiquitousness. But I think from gameplay wise, I think they're closer to these value engine cards like Bloodbraid Elf and Birthing Pod, and Birthing Pod and Luros to me seem the most similar. Would you agree?
I think that's pretty fair, because you think about other 3-drops that have come out that do kind of similar things. It's funny, like we talked about Oko. It's different than Oko, but I actually would say there are still sort of like similar feels to it.
I think that has a little to do just with recency, right?
Maybe a recency bias, yeah.
Because the decks that play them aren't similar. Well, ish, because Luros, and that's I think one of the reasons Luros and Yorion are seeing the most play is they kind of ask the least of you and offer the most versatile skill set, right?
Well, I think Yorion, like so Luros is like so much more. It's similar to like very, very high level competitive things that we've seen that are pushing their power level at a low CMC to get value. I've seen that before, and where I think Yorion is a little different is like Yorion's a 4/5 flyer for 5 anyway, so it's just not that different from the stats you'd be getting at like a control finisher in most decks to begin with. It's a little different. I mean, you're not going to just play a 4/5 flyer for 5 in most control decks, but it's not that far from it, right? The thing is, though, when Yorion comes down, you have all these permanents on the battlefield that have already generated you value. If it resolves and they don't counter it, you get like 6 cards worth, and all the permanents are still there. Like it's like an insurmountable advantage that the only way you're going to beat is if you have a combo that's going to win the next turn. Like that's the literal only way you'll probably beat if they resolve that.
And as a control finisher option, if I'm a control deck, I no longer have to play a way to kill them. I'm guaranteed to get it. I just have to be able to protect that thing once it's in play. And so by guaranteeing that I'm going to eventually get this, not even that I'm eventually going to get this card, I have this card whenever I want it. And it's never in my hand, so they can't Thoughtseize it. Like that's one of the power levels too, right? It's just there's the only way to deal with these cards are counterspells, or they gain some amount of value when they enter play.
Is Tail's End going to just become like the most played card in Modern?
I don't know what that card does.
Tail's End is the 1 blue, 1 colorless counterspell. I think it's like counter target legendary spell, activated ability or triggered ability, maybe. I think something like that.
1, maybe. Yeah. Oh, I know what you're talking about. That card is sweet.
The card's sick.
So moving past kind of what these cards compare to, right? I think that was kind of the point, was to say, like, establish, like, this is what we're comparing to. Delve is one of the most broken mechanics of all time. Birthing Pod, Bloodbraid Elf, these are some of the most powerful cards ever printed. Stoneforge Mystic, and the fact that these cards are comparable to those is saying a lot. And there's 3 options. We list them at the first. The first one is ban them, and this is I have this in different order, but I think it's easier to start with just ban Luros and Yorion. Like, just start with Luros and Yorion. But kind of from my perspective, I don't think this problem goes away with just the 2 of them. I think that right now they're seeing a lot of play, and they're the ones that are going to see the most play, partially due to the fact that they're versatile. The fact that Luros fits in 7 different strategies that are all totally different. The fact that Yorion can fit into 4 different strategies, from snow control decks to blue-eye control decks to ramp decks, focusing on Euro. Like, anything that can handle having 80 cards versus 60 cards can play Yorion and just gain value off of it. And anything that just can play a bunch of 2-drops can play Luros. And so because they don't ask very much of you, and they both also have effects, like a 4/5 that blinks all of the value stuff you have in play is going to be good in 99% of decks that can cast it.
Agreed.
A 3/2 lifelinker that lets you rebuy cards from your graveyard is going to be good in 90% of decks that can cast it, unless you have no permanent spells. And so, like, those are the easy ones and are finding the most homes quickly. But I think that, like, the next tier down, you're already seeing with Obosh that we mentioned, are gonna see play.
Well, I think where you Okay, so let's like just think about this from the perspective of this is a thing that has never existed in Magic that you can now do. You can now have a guaranteed in 1v1 competitive standard play or modern, whatever. The guarantee of this thing that I am hinging all of my hopes and dreams of this deck on will now happen on the turn that I hope it happens every time. So right off the bat, if Lurrus and Urion get banned, and what you're left with is Obosh and the lesser good ones,
Well, but like,
probably they're not as good, I guess. But the thing is, it's possible that mechanic is just strong enough that the people that are playing those will just shift to the worst strategies and then shape their decks around that idea. And modern specifically has a large enough card pool that if the idea that starting with an extra card in your hand is good enough, people will find a way to warp the strategy and probably make it unfair. Now, that's not necessarily true. It's possible that it's just the upper echelon of the strategy is what got pushed the most, and that's what we're afraid of. So it is possible that if you just ban those two, it would be okay. But as it stands right now,
yeah, except like in the first week of these things being legal, there were a bunch of decks playing the other ones. The fact that there's like 3 cat decks that people have sent me where Kihira like gives them a turn 3 win. And the fact that Kihira can also be played out of every, like, if Yorion is banned, most of these control decks, or a lot of these control decks, start playing just Kihira and don't play with creatures. You just don't need them. You're guaranteed a 3/2 vigilance lord for maybe some like the tokens you're making with planeswalkers, but then you just play with planeswalkers and you move on with your life. Like that's kind of an insane card advantage availability. Then you get down to the next level, which is the Oboshes and Cayugas, and then you get to the next level of like
you're literally saying that a control deck, that there would be no benefit to playing this lord other than the fact that it's just a free card and it's a creature, and if you're controlling the board, you'll just win with your 3/2. That's like basically it.
That's what they're doing.
3/2 creature.
Like there's no like it. I don't have to play with creatures in a modern control deck. I just don't need them. There's planeswalkers. There's other threats. There's lands. Like there's so many other options. Why not have the free creature in my sideboard? I don't need
Wrath,
that sideboard
counterspell, kill things, play a 3/2, attack a bunch of times, win the game.
Yeah,
that's enough.
Yeah,
I think that's a terrifying reality that you're suggesting right now.
And but I think it's fine if other people are getting advantage from those companions. I think this is just the world we live in with companion being legal. So our choices are, and for the record, as we go through this, we're saying print more companions. I do think that's one of the solutions to this problem. Because I think the more there are, at least the more diversity of threats there are, and then just Magic is diverse. You just have companions in Magic as a permanent feature. But like I think Lurrus is going to get banned. It feels like Birthing Pot. It feels like a card of that power level. I think that they've already stated that's problematic in Modern. My issue with just banning Lurrus and Yorion is I think that it's not enough. Likely, I think it's going to keep dropping down, and the companion value as shown by Standard and Legacy and every other format is too high that just getting rid of the one that is the most versatile, because that's the other issue I have with banning Lurrus, right? Like Yorion decks are all kind of the same. They're not that different. But Lurrus decks, there's 8 of them. They're all different. There's everything from Burn to Coco-esque decks to, all these decks are so different that getting rid of the one that's creating a versatile and diverse game state just because it's seeing the most play seems kind of lame. And like,
yeah, I mean, I think that if you are talking about banning, I mean, I've said this before, but like the most basic thing I would look at is Lurrus costs 3. It costs 3 and it's very value oriented. Yorion costs 5. If you cast Yorion on turn 5 and it gets countered, fine. If you cast it on turn 7, it's an advantage to have it in a control deck because it's one more card, but like that's turn 7 in Modern. The issue with Lurrus really is like it's that good and it's that early. That to me is such a distinct difference in the two. I understand how good Yorion is, but it's to me it's night and day.
I don't know if I'm gonna have to disagree, and I don't want to get too deep into the difference between 3 and 5 drops. A 5 drop in a control deck and a 3 drop or a 5 drop in a ramps and control decks, right? Because the decks aren't just control decks; they're decks playing Uros that are getting Yorion on turn 4, not turn 6.
Sure.
And the difference between those two, from what is seeing play, Lurrus is obviously more powerful, but part of that is just there are more decks that it's falling into, and I think that's kind of roll of the dice that there's just, and the burn deck seems to be very good. But it's not necessarily a power level conversation to me. It's a versatility conversation. And the point of the ban, right? If I'm banning Luros right now, it's a ban of diversity. It's not a ban of power level. No one's winning on turn 2. It's not a ban of breaking the rules of Magic, kind of. We'll get into that. But breaking the rules of Magic in the sense that like tournaments don't work anymore. I'm not playing eggs with Luros. It's this card is seeing too much play. It's in too many decks, and it's making it so other decks can't see play because it exists. But that's not Luros' issue. That's Companion's issue. Luros is actually, of the Companions, the one creating the most different decks that are seeing play in the format.
Okay, fair. So we have suggested the idea of banning Luros, and you're in.
Well, I think it's more
the idea of banning.
Yeah, it's more not necessarily suggesting the idea. It's seeing the problem with it is if you ban Urine and Luros, you just the other Companions see play. It's just in less diverse metagames. Right.
So what about banning them all then?
That's the other option, or not the other option, because the third one is banning more. But that's the other main option that people have talked about, or like changing the rule of Companion, which is weird. Unless they change it in Standard as well, which is still weird. I don't think they've ever done that. I don't think they've ever, like this quickly at least, retroactively changed a mechanic they printed into a format. Like they've changed rules like Mana Burn, right? Then that changed how cards work, and they changed like targeting wording, but they've never like said, oh, suspend actually now gives all creatures haste, or doesn't give them haste anymore. That was too good. It was a mistake.
I mean, from the perspective of rarity, they're all just rares. They're not mythics. So like if you were to ban them all, it hurts people, but it doesn't destroy people in the same way that banning like a mythic does.
Is it weird that my perspective is the ban list should be as minimal as possible. And maybe that is a mentality that has changed, but like if we just have these 10 cards, and when we say all of them, it could just be 7 of them, right? Like maybe 3 of them can be not unbanned and they wouldn't see as much play, but I think that would be
I think if you were going to ban
cards
them,
on the ban list.
I think you just ban them. Like where I see it is this is not even something that exists in paper yet. So let's just pretend they're like, okay, we're going to give this a little bit of time, right? Because I do not think Monday, and I realize they've said they're not going to ban modern cards, but like I'm happy that we're not going to find out Monday that Companions are dead before they even hit stores. Like I'm glad that's not happening. That would be a bad idea. But if we look back in 2 months and it's kind of similar, every single competitive deck or 90% of them is just like playing one of the top Companions. I think it's a fair consideration at that point to say, you know what? This is a cool idea. We thought it was going to work a little better than it did. It doesn't make Magic better. It's not that fun for people to have the same play experience so often. We're going to ban these 10 cards. It was a failed experiment. We move on. Like, that's not the worst to me. It makes that set kind of screwy. But look, we're in the middle of COVID. These sets are screwy anyway. Like, nobody is going to remember these sets and this moment with Magic anywhere near as like clearly or normally as they would remember something even just a year ago. Like, I haven't played a game of paper, physical, in-person Magic with someone in months.
Sure, but like there's been like more games of digital Magic played with these cards than probably in this short of a period of time ever before, right? Like especially because like so many people are unemployed, 25% unemployment right now. There's so many people stuck at home. There's so many people with more free time and aren't going out on weekends. They're not going to paper stores, and the only way they can play Magic is through Arena or Moto. And these cards have been available there, and their effect on the metagame is pretty obvious. We're seeing pretty blatant, ubiquitous just dispersal and
adoption of these cards. Yeah,
and what's going to be really interesting is what they do in Legacy and Vintage. I think that's going to dictate a little bit more, and we'll talk about this next week. What the outcome could be for Modern, because they could just ban all these cards in Vintage and Legacy. They could just be like, sorry, Companion doesn't work in Vintage. Or like the restricted mechanic now, the rules are if a card is restricted, it is both only allowed to have one in your deck and you cannot use them as a companion. Like just call out Companion in that mechanic.
Can we actually just really quickly address so one of the options is to ban them all. We've just said that. And I think
or the majority, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Somewhere
one of the things we mentioned a second ago we were going to get to was this inherently changes Magic, right? Having these cards if they become ubiquitous, right? Like if they become a thing where most decks, let's say like at least 75% of decks are playing a companion, that is not the same game Richard Garfield designed. He did not design a game where you have an extra half card or an extra full card you can just play every single game. Does that change Magic enough that it no longer represents the thing that has got this immaculate track record? Because there's been so many other games that have based their entire system off of Magic, but's changed it slightly, and a lot of those games have failed. I don't want to look at Magic and look back and be like, yeah, this game got worse because they decided to change one mechanic, and that mechanic was basically a drastic rules change. It's not planeswalkers or vehicles; it's an actual rule change. You get an extra card if you play with his mechanic.
I mean, that statement that other games have failed is not totally true. Like Pokemon is going strong, Yu-Gi-Oh is going strong, Hearthstone is done.
Not
very,
every
very
game
well
has failed. A lot of them have come out and tried to change it and failed. Tons have tried to and failed. Tons.
Sure, but some of it succeeded, and Magic has borrowed from them, right? Like flip cards came from Bakugan, not Bakugan. Battle Monsters, Wizards' other Japanese game. I forgot what it's called.
Sure.
I'm going to call it Battle Monsters, and someone in chat's going to hopefully, or chat in comments will correct me.
Battle Monsters.
But other games have come out that have affected Magic, and like to say that this is such an inherent change compared to other things, like the rules that Wizards changed in 6th edition were a more drastic change to me than the fact that you can play cards. Wish cards do something similar to this and haven't been a problem pretty much ever. And like, yes, there are like, they're different. They modify the way games play, and they're so powerful that they're becoming ubiquitous, which is affecting gameplay in a way that other mechanics maybe didn't. But I don't think this is I think this is less of a rules break than say mana burn changing, or even just like damage on. Actually, a good example is damage on the stack. I think damage on the stack changing is so much more significant than people being able to play companions, especially because Commander exists, especially because for the most part they're just creatures that come into play on turn 3.
But
later.
I think one of the things that you're like not acknowledging is when you say it's so okay. Like imagine that I'm playing on my side of the table, and my thing I get is I get to play with companion. So I can bring to the table an extra card in my sideboard. And your thing is you get to play with wishes. So now you can access your sideboard, but I can't do that. You can trade 1-for-1, spending mana and a turn to get a card from your sideboard to answer what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I get 8 cards. Like,
sure.
I know from having played Magic, card advantage usually wins the game. So one of them is distinctly a huge, massive advantage, whereas the other one is like, card selection, 1-for-1, that's cool. It's really good. I like wish cards, but 8 cards versus 7 cards is.
But my argument was never that wishes are as powerful as companions. I think companions are a more powerful mechanic than wishes. My statement is that they're within the rules of Magic, and that the change that these. My statement was that this is less of a significant change than damage on the stack. And I think damage on the stack changing is much better for Magic in general, and Magic changing is good. Like them change, like, because if you want to go back to what Richard Garfield intended, 5 mana 2/2s are the norm. I have Black Lotus in play. I'm able to like play weird, powerful counter spells, but terrible creatures. If I want a 5/5, I have to lose 3 life every turn and sacrifice a land when it enters the battlefield.
Force of nature and Lord of the Pit, rule the roost.
Right. Like, Richard Garfield, like, let's not even get into the Cold Snap card, not Cold Snap, in Ice Age. Fjöldrorn, whatever. What is it, like 17,000 words to tell you that white enchantments don't tap?
Oh, that guy, the Balduvian shaman, the blue guy. He's my favorite card in the world. Yeah.
But yeah, so like Magic has changed over time pretty significantly, and not always.
And that's a good thing. And that's a good thing. I'll be the first to admit it. Like change is good. What I'm trying to tell you is, I am just looking at this whole thing and going, if we don't ban them. And this becomes a mainstay, and then I guess suggests the next point, which is like, what if we just print more of them? I don't know if I have that much faith that makes Magic a better game. I actually kind of think probably it doesn't, is my general feeling, and we can get to it in a second.
So that brings us to the next point, I guess, because you segued already, and then you back segued, but we're segueing. The third option, which is print more. Say, the next set comes out, and Teferi has a dog that we didn't know he had, and that's a companion that now gets added to Magic. Because kind of what War of the Spark did, right? War of the Spark added text box based planeswalkers or uncommon planeswalkers or planeswalkers with no ultimate ability that like had static abilities, all that stuff. And then the next set, M20, came out, and Chandra had 3 cards. All 3 of them did one of those things, right? The Chandra 3 mana rare didn't have an ultimate ability. 6 mana Chandra had a static, can't be countered, and there was an uncommon Chandra at 4 mana. So like there's a very high chance that if they were like, companion is going to be a thing, we're going to walk into M21 and then Teferi is going to have a companion, or there's going to be 5 3-color gold companions that are leaning into this now being a part of Magic. I don't think this is happening. I'm not shot calling this. I'm saying, like, what if they did start just printing more? Does that offer the diversity that people think they're losing with Loros, or that they're losing right now, or the fact that games are consistent? Because I think that's my point, is I don't think that they're that broken from a consistency basis. Like, the fact that your deck is slightly more consistent isn't that much better than other card filtering mechanics. But I do think the issue is that there's only 10 options.
Let me ask you, so let's just pretend tomorrow, Rosewater, Forsyth, they're like, hey, you know what? They're awesome. We don't want to ban them. We want to make more of them. What's the soonest we can get these in people's hands? Realistically, even if they were to take sets that were like basically finalized, getting ready to, the review was done, they were going to start printing. The fastest we'd probably even see these cards is like a year, maybe. Like that would be like really fast track, but normally sets are 2 years. So,
well, it depends, right? Are they? Well, depends on 2 things. One, did they already believe that? If they said, because they're not going to do that now, right? Companion is I believe Mark Rosewater said infect levels of contentious. Some people love it. Yep. I think I'm among them, as a person who's now played enough of them that I've enjoyed them in gameplay. Some people hate them. A very loud portion of the internet hates them.
Sure.
But between the two, that's pretty contentious. So I think tomorrow they don't make that decision unless they like really listen to this podcast and decide what we're talking about makes sense.
Okay, but we're trying to acknowledge the reality of printing more of them. So like, what's the fastest? What's the soonest we would get them?
What I was saying is that if they had made that decision, they made it beforehand, which means that it could happen as soon as M20. That's what or M21. I'm saying it could happen in July, right? That they could have already said Companion's now a thing that we want more of. It's really fun in the Future League. Everyone really, really loves it. They're playing within every one of their decks. Let's make more of them, because I think one of the issues is that we need diversity. I think one of the reasons they're all hybrid mana, and one of the reasons that a lot of their abilities are kind of base level versatile, like Loros, is because they wanted to make sure as many different decks as possible could play with them. The next step to that is printing more. So it could be M21 if they decide now. The first way they can get them into standard is Brawl decks, which I think can happen within 6 months. So the Brawl decks for Eldraine came out, and they were standard legal cards. So
it's like a weird loophole, but like you could still, if you wanted to add them last minute, you could get them.
So if they were like, Companion's a surefire hit, but we don't know what will be, let's put them in the commander. They'll be Brawl decks with 1 commander and 1 companion. That'll be the theme. It'll be themed around Zendikar. There'll be allies or something thematically, and we'll come out with them in 6 months. It'll come out in October. And if it goes terribly, we can we haven't announced the Brawls decks where we just won't ship them. We'll take those cards out and put something else. It's a lot easier for us to interchange that 1 card. That's the quickest, I think, right? Based on my knowledge of how these things are printed. And especially because it's a product that hasn't been announced, is a product that was experimental last year. That's the moment they came out with them. I can see them being a little bit easier to just pull the plug on it. That would be the quickest. The quickest in a regular way is M22. Because core set development starts
like 18 months minimum.
Because core sets have a year of development time, if I remember correctly. Or where a normal set has 2 years, a core set has about a year to 18 months. But like theoretically, they're within that first 6 month period, which is when things can still be changed. So they could add cards or take them away. And theoretically, this is going to be another set where they put them in there, and because of the response being as negative as it has been, they take it out. So those would be the next 2 moments. And any companion sets that come out, commander and companion sets that come out that year could all have it, but those would be the next 2 real moments that they could do something. I guess it could be it could also be in the Commander Masters, the draft commander format that's coming out in November. As far as product, now I'm listing off all the product that comes out in the next year, but
Yeah.
that's the other one, right? Where they like, these are the places that you could put companions. You can put them in core sets, you can put them in any regular set, you can put them in Commander's products, you can put them in Brawl products, or you can put them in like Modern Horizons, Battle Bond,
Sure.
like printing directly into other formats, not standard draft formats. And the next one's the Commander one. Companions fit into that pretty successfully, and it actually explains more of the Commander Council's reasoning for making sure companions work in Commander, is that Wizards told them there's going to be more of these, and we're leaning into it pretty heavily, so you need to get on board. Otherwise, yeah, I mean that is another thing, right? Like, the decision of the Commander Council is weird, that they're like, yeah, companions, let's make them work.
Well, so like there's a level to it, I guess, that's like, maybe Wizards looks and goes, okay, so the financial stability of the game Magic the Gathering is based on the idea that Commander has been very successful. It has been a really, really big hit. A lot of our other things we tried have been kind of big hits, but Commander has crushed. So if that's the case, how do we make 1v1 competitive formats reflect some of the principles of Commander to get people who play Commander into buying standard packs and playing standard, right?
Mhm.
So maybe that's the case, and that's what's going on. So if that's what's coming down the pipeline, before we know that information, before we know if it's confirmed that's what's happening or not, what is your ultimate opinion, Alex Kessler? Do we print more? Do we ban some? Or do we ban them all?
Personally, I would print more if I controlled the universe. Yeah, I think they're fun. I played with them a lot on Arena at this point, and they make your deck consistent. They offer cool deck building challenges. They do cool things. The issue to me, and like things I would have done differently with the first 10 that were made, would have not made them hybrid mana. I think that's one of the things that's been problematic, is that you literally can play them in any deck, not in Commander, but who cares? Because Commander's reacting to these in a much more calm way. But I think that's one of the big limitations of these cards, is that just like you can play them in any deck, like a white and or black deck, which is, I would say, probably at least 60% of decks in Magic can play Luros. And that, to me, and or just splash one of those colors to be able to play it. So I think that's a limitation they had, but they exist, right? We're not going to get rid of them. They're not going to say these never existed. We can ban them all. It would be an unprecedented moment to ban 6 cards with the same mechanic all out of the gate. The alternative is we go through what last year looked like, and last year sucked as far as the banning process went, right? Where it was like,
bannings, yeah, not cool.
We'll ban 2 of them. We'll ban Luros and Urian. And then after 2 weeks, we're like, oh, Kihiri, Obosh, and Cayuga all are problematic. All right, we'll ban those 3. Oh, well, now Giruda and the red-green one and the other one are forcing everyone to have to play with decks that take advantage of this. Okay, we'll get rid of those now, too. Well, now we've gone through 3 banning periods over a summer or over a year just of those cards in Modern, not to mention, we're going to get some weird, super powerful blue-white Teferi of 21. We're going to get some, like, Battle for Zendikar, or Zendikar 3 is going to be the last set within the Eldraine power level spike, the War of the Spark power level spike. So we have one more set that will be at this weird super power level, I believe. And then that should be a taildown. So there could be cards there, right? The Uro could be banned. Astrolabe should be banned.
I think if I was gonna vote for it, what I would say is I would go beyond just Urian and Luris. I think I would probably go half. I'd probably pick the 5 that are the highest power level. I'd ban 5.
Even if 2 of them or 3 of them aren't seeing any play at that moment.
I would literally pick the ones that you, based on the giant brains that work at Wizards, are looking and being like, yeah, but like this could create this could create this. I'd ban those 5. I would leave the 5 that have the least effect in the format. I'd give it some time, and then if they crush, and if like the format can't rebound from just like the idea of being able to play an 8th card in your sideboard, then you ban them all. But I wouldn't just ban the 2 and let people just shift to the next ones, because the idea is, I think that like right now people are not acknowledging how much of an advantage it is. So I think you have to really make sure you're going,
people
it's the advantage and the card.
Wizards.
I'm saying like maybe people are, but I guess in our conversation, the idea that like it's the advantage and the quality of card. I think it's the advantage and the quality of card and the convenience of the card. So like you've got to go a step further. You have to try to like quash kind of just like anything that's even kind of good. And I guess if they're all kind of good, they all should go. But I would still say probably
Well, but
looking at
like if they're
the
just kind of good, who cares? The issue is, are they so powerful that you can't do anything else? And if they are that powerful and you can't do anything else, are they unfun? Because if Magic, it's not non-diverse. Like that's, I think, pretty provable in Modern. In Standard, different conversation. In Pioneer, definitely different conversation. In Legacy, different conversation. But in Modern right now, there are 7 different Luros decks, and most of them are doing pretty drastically different things. There are 4 Urion decks, at least 3 of them are doing different things. There are decks that aren't playing them. Obosh decks are totally different. The Kahira decks we mentioned are totally different. So from a diversity perspective, which is, I think, my like general basis for fun, right? Modern sucks when you have to play against the same card the same strategy every round. Modern sucks when you lose before you could have even stopped your opponent from killing you. I didn't have a chance to thought seize you. I didn't have a chance to counterspell. I didn't have a chance to lightning bolt your thing, and you just killed me. I don't know. Like someone playing a 3/2 grindy value engine doesn't seem to make Modern terrible. And
I would say that like Umori, I would say Lutri, I would say probably Karuga, that I could be wrong about that. They all seem kind of like whatever to me. Like they're good. I think if
Karuga's
pushed,
an issue in
if the other ones are gone,
not in Modern,
what?
for sure. Karuga's an issue in Standard, but not in Modern.
And like that's okay. Like if those cards, people want to build a deck that's like everything shares a type and you play it on 4 and it gets cheaper.
But my issue is based on what we've seen with companions in every format, where you are wrong for not playing a companion.
I think if you were to get rid of the ones that are inherently powerful and just go with the ones that are like a good, powerful value thing you can play at a later turn of the game, or like the thing it's getting, like for instance, all things in your deck need to share a card type. You play it for 4 mana, you untap, those things cost 1 less.
That doesn't
really worry me.
Yeah. Like that's the one will survive forever. No one's playing that card.
Right? That's okay, but like you're laughing, but like fine. So if you start there, okay, Karuga, like 5 mana, 5/4 cards in your deck have to have CMC 3 or greater, and land cards, and you draw cards. Like that's a big, heavy 5/4 for 5 that's gonna like draw you a bunch of cards in like a chompy deck. It's probably fine in Modern. Like Modern's not that worried about you playing something for 5 that gets you lots of value. Like
except that you're guaranteed to get it, right? Like that's kind of the issue.
Yeah, I guess it's in blue, so it's like how different is that really from Urion, really?
Right, and blue can get away with that, right? You can play with just stuff that you can play with counterspells that cost 3 mana. You can play with force negations. You can play with dismembers to make sure you don't have anything under 3, and then you also have this insane card draw engine that lets you get value off your play, like off later in the game. I guess my point is that in every format these have shown up, it becomes important to play them. And even if you ban Luros and Yorion, who are seeing as much play as they are, not necessarily because they're the most powerful options of these cards, though in some ways they are, but also because they're the most versatile. They show up in the most different strategies, so they've had the highest opportunity to find homes that are powerful.
Yeah.
You get rid of those, and now you're stuck with 6 cards that you still have to play, but pigeonhole deck strategies. You have to play the Garuda clones deck. You have to play some type of fires control deck with the hippo dinosaur. You have to play.
But all that being said, you are still in the camp of print more. That's still how you feel.
I'm in the camp of not really. I don't think I want to ban Luros, I guess, is in the camp I am. And I think the best way to make that format more diverse is to print more. You ban Mishra's Bauble, and then you see what happens. But I think the real answer is you have to ban them all. That's where I'm at. Maybe you just ban Luros. Maybe Luros is the corner case. I'm not like considering, right? It is as powerful as Birthing Pot. I said it early in the podcast. Maybe it's worth just getting rid of that card and you keep the other 9 and we move on with their lives and you just have to play them. So maybe Luros gets banned and then there's 9. But if we're in that world, I think getting rid of Luros lowers diversity in Modern if companions are still legal. That's my main point, actually. More than anything, is this card is adding diversity. You're still getting Luros every game, but if you get rid of it, then you have a bunch of companion decks you still have to play, but they're less diverse than what Luros is doing.
I guess
So
the
there's less
last weird
choices.
point to point out about this,
You lose, yeah. You lose. What's it called? Death Shadow. Death Shadow no longer is really viable.
I mean, Lurrus as a card, a 3/2 for 3 that allows you to play something from your graveyard for CMC 2 or less every turn, not as your companion, but just as a card, is a sweet card. I like that card. Like I'm planning on playing that card in Highlander and not as my companion, just as a card I can play in
Oh
my
yeah,
deck.
yeah. I'm playing it
So
in Gladiator.
it's like I almost think like, what about just banning the companion rule?
I think that's the best answer. I just don't know if it is possible.
Because like the card reads this. Oh, but that rule is banned. That's weird.
It's what's worse, a ban list with 10 cards on it of a new flashy mechanic for the 4th time this year, or Wizards saying, you know what, this mechanic didn't work. Or the one thing that people have pointed out is that what's actually said on a companion is not all of the rules text. It's like you can only cast this card. Let me bring it up. Because it is important, the exact specifics of what it says versus the short.
I've got it in front of me here, so I can read it to you.
Perfect.
If this card is in your chosen if this card is your chosen companion, you may cast it once from outside the game. That's what is written on the card.
So, if this card is your chosen companion, you can cast it once from outside the game. It doesn't say
from your sideboard.
From your sideboard. It doesn't say like if you have a companion, you have to do enough. Like someone brought up, you have to discard a card, or if you have a companion, the rule is now that you have to London Mulligan once. Right. So that brings at least your hand size back down to 6. Which means it's
some cards
more
don't
like
have reminder text. I mean, like some cards don't have reminder text, and we understand how they work based on other factors.
Right. Like there are tons of rares don't, right? Like that's a normally a rare doesn't need a reminder text box for a new mechanic. Like there's a bunch of cards that say cycling green. That's it in this set.
Yeah.
Or cycling red, whatever it is. So yeah, I think that's the messiest solution. The cleanest solution to me, I think, is probably the cleanest solution outside of just printing more of them. I think is or just letting them survive is just saying companions don't work in formats. The companion mechanic no longer functions. That's my hope, I guess, the best version of this. My point, though, on because we named the episode this, so we should really touch upon it a little bit. Why to print more is I don't think getting rid of Lurrus makes the format better with them. I don't think going down, but I do think if you print a bunch more that are more versatile, that give you benefits for building decks in different ways, you do get more diversity and more fun in gameplay. I think that companion inherently is very fun. It's just a feature that kind of has to be at the start of a game. And that's what you're kind of saying, right? Is that this modifies what I'm saying would modify Magic in a much thorough way than it already has been. If like companions become more of a feature of Magic just in general, and they're encouraged and they're in every set and they're evergreen and they're kind of like legendary creatures where every set has like 1 or 2 to 10 companions, then Magic is changed. Not necessarily for the worst or better. That's debatable, and we literally could spend an entire episode. If that were to happen, we should wait till then, because otherwise we're talking about a future that probably will never exist. Is that better or worse? But for sure, mana flood happens less often. All those things are still true. So, and these cards are fun. When you play them, they are fun. The problem is that they're just showing up too commonly in tournament play, and is that if they're fun, but they're like too common, is that problematic when like there are other cards like Lightning Bolt and other things that are that. And if we printed more of them, you wouldn't face Lurrus 6 times in a tournament. You would play Lurrus, then you'd play the Merfolk version of it, then you'll play the Artifact version of it, you'll play the Eldrazi one, and then you'll play the like Snapcaster Mage, the whatever ones they print with whatever requirements they have. And it also opens up what the decks are, so it's less pigeonholed. I guess that was my thought, is if we're gonna keep them, to actually do the thing. Because if you're just gonna kind of dip your toe in the water, but we're now stuck with these 9 cards forever, that sucks.
I would agree. Guys, I think that's going to wrap up the episode this week. Thank you to everybody who listens and watches. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell on YouTube if you have not already. If you're listening on audio, check out patreon.com/the MMcast. We have a bunch of cool stuff going on there. Be sure to check out my new thing I'm doing, youtube.com/nerds and suits. awesome one-on-one interviews plus live music. It's something very close to my heart. I appreciate everybody who has already checked it out. And Kess, where can the folks find you?
And make sure to follow me on Twitch at Kess Wiley. I'm at Kess Wiley everywhere. So KessWYlie. It's been below my name this whole time. And thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure to definitely check out Patreon. Make sure to check out all of the other things we're doing. And hit the bell because we'll be fast. I'd love to hear in the comments where you guys are at on the subject matter. Do you hate Companion? Have you played with it and have you had fun with it? Is it something that you hate playing against, or is it something that you could maybe deal with more often? And where do you guys fall on the subject matter? And yeah, we'll see you guys. There's going to be a hot take hopefully this Monday talking about
hot take
Mishra's Bobble, so you should check that out as well. Thank you, Marshall. Thank you once again, Nobles of House Modern, and all of our patrons, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Pinkies up. Bye, guys.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.